Gardner Minshew off of the Eagles bench into our lineups. That and more this week on the couch. A great day to be talking to Ian Hartitz. Ian, it's fun, but are we getting in trouble for mixing fun with fantasy football playoffs with Gardner Minshew this week?
Well, first of all, Sid, great to be back on the couch with you, my man. Always a pleasure. And I don't think so, man. We have a pretty decent sample size that tells us that Gardner Minshew is a perfectly average, if not better, fantasy quarterback than real life, going back to those seasons where he got, the full-time starting job in Jacksonville for an extended stretch. So we've seen more guys, the Malik Willis's, Tyler Huntley's of the world, where I think we've had a smaller sample size and maybe had to buy more into, their theoretical ability with more snaps, and everything versus someone like Gardner, who, again, not great. 33rd in PFF passing grade among 57 guys over the time period, 33rd in yards per attempt, 20th in passer rating. He's an average to above average quarterback. But here's the difference, Sig, between Gardner Minshew with the Jaguars and now the Eagles offense. Quarterback not included. I'm not trying to slander Jalen Hurts here because obviously you saw how that point spread boom when he got taken out of the equation. No Jalen Hurts slander tolerated, but I don't think there's a better offense in the NFL if you look at the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, now Dallas Goedert's back as well, and offensive line involved than the Eagles. So if we're able to drop, again, a perfectly average quarterback into arguably the single best offensive environment in the league, I think we have an upside QB2 in fantasy land.
Yeah, I think so. And I was trying to go through, and there's nothing wrong with fun too. Really what we want here, Ian, is the precursor for Gardner Minshew being next year's Geno Smith, right? Someone brings him in to be a bridge quarterback or a placeholder until they find something better, and they find out they already have something better. But when you look at the quarterbacks, let's do a quick exercise because we're really going to drill down on week 16. It's the fantasy playoffs. It's do or die. Like, who are the quarterbacks that we're going to play over Gardner Minshew this week, right? Well, I guess before I do that exercise really quick, because the first one of the four quarterbacks I'm going to say is Josh Allen. Well, I'll save it. So we're going to talk about weather. Josh Allen, even though it's potentially in the 25-mile-an-hour winds, you're still playing Josh Allen over Gardner Minshew, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Justin Fields as well, man. If there are two
absolutely.
quarterbacks out there that can make do with this weather, it's two of the best rushers in the league, and Allen and Fields.
Tua's back, right? Tua's back in our good graces going against the Packers. Would we play Trevor Lawrence against the Jets on Thursday over Minshew?
Yeah, I still think so. I actually, and shout out to Kevin Roth over at Rotogrinders. I just saw Jared Smola tweet out some of the information he has weather-wise, and Jacksonville, New York is in his orange rating, so it is a bit of a concern, not going to be pretty, but to your point, I mean, Lawrence, since that week 11 bye, PFF's highest graded passer, number one in passer rating. Pick your favorite stat. You guys have watched him play. Dude is playing out of his mind the last 4 weeks.
Yeah, and it's that short passing game, which makes it less prone to the weather and also less prone to be slowed down by the underrated Jets defense now. Are we going to play Lamar Jackson if he plays over Minshew?
Yeah, I still think so. Again, I mean, I'm thinking upside QB2 here, so we're going to have a few more names to go. The one thing I will say with Lamar, I mean, look, again, in no way would I ever think that, Lamar to Huntley is anything close between the two, but some slack, I guess, just how bad they looked against the Browns. And it's like, oh, man, look at the miracle that Lamar has done with this team, which you can't make that argument. I mean, the fact that, hey, God bless Patrick Ricard and everything he does in the run game, but he should not be running wheel routes, in a professional football game and be expected to be an actual pass catcher in that offense. That said, Lamar, for how amazing he was, the first 3 weeks of the year, he's had one fantasy finish inside the top 10 quarterbacks since week 4. So the injury didn't help. Losing Bateman didn't help. Not having Ronnie Stanley at running backs. We can break through that. Everything great I just said about the Eagles' offensive environment. The Ravens are on the complete other side of things. So not Lamar slander, but right now in my early ranks, I have Lamar as QB9, which feels weird given all these weather concerns. That said, he just hasn't really been the MVP talent we saw in 2019 this year.
Yeah, my lexicon doing start-sit questions, if someone said, I'm thinking of starting Minshew over Lamar Jackson, is that crazy? No, it's not crazy. And I'd like to say I won't talk you out of it. I definitely won't talk you out of it. And anybody who's still tuned in, paying attention, their fantasy football teams have made it this far. Trust yourself. We'll give you our insight. So, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, these guys you're going to play over Minshew. Jared Goff at Carolina, we're in that similar zone where it's not someone we necessarily trusted on and off this year. How do we feel about Jared Goff versus Minshew?
That's where I have them right next to each other. So
Okay.
looking at who's generally available, I think if Goff and then even Daniel Jones in the Vikings dome, we know he's got the rushing upside. Maybe they get a little healthier out wide receiver
Yeah.
this week. Those are the two guys where if they are available, I would start them ahead of Minshew because again, we've seen a little bit more from them this year. And I do think that Goff, okay, outdoors, dome splits aside, okay, it's still going to be reasonable enough weather in Carolina. And yeah, Brian Burns and company, very good defense. And that was always kind of the thing with the Panthers going to all out tank now that they're getting rid of McCaffrey. Credit to them for keeping some of those pieces and inexplicably competing in this ridiculous NFC South division this season. But for me, I have Minshew basically right there, QB 16 behind Goff, where it's going to be ahead of guys like Brock Purdy, like Zach Wilson, like Derek Carr. So I think you can argue that he is probably the best waiver wire ad of the week at the position based on the guys that are mostly available.
Yeah, and you get into some jockeying, right? Because at this point, if your waiver wire is still open, you can play defense on the waiver wire. And a lot of Jalen Hurts teams are in the playoffs. A lot of first-round bye teams. Are Jalen Hurts teams. And yes, you better bet it's worth emptying your wallet. And if Gardner Minshew, you've also put Brock Purdy, you mentioned in that vein, sometimes the best move you can make is a move you keep your opponent from making. So absolutely, a Gardner Minshew, check to see who your opponents are playing to see if you can deny them that option. I'm sure that Tom Brady is going to be ahead of Gardner Minshew this week. It's got a good matchup again. Whether I like that you're at least noting, like, hey, if there's indoor games or games where the weather's not going to be a factor, that's at least something we should consider. Another game where weather probably won't be a factor down in Miami. Aaron Rodgers. Are we going to let Aaron Rodgers back into our circle of trust, or at least when we're weighing him against those types, like you said, Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew, et cetera?
I think so in this spot. Brady and Rodgers are guys that in the past few weeks, like depending on their matchup, I've had down as low as like QB 20 for a time or two with the guys. And guess what, man? Like it's just wild how like couple months ago, we were sitting like, don't worry about, especially the Buccaneers, I think was the team that we all kind of expected to catch their stride eventually. But here we are in week 16 and still just hasn't quite gone that way. At least with Brady, he has, I think, 3 finishes in the top 13 in his last 4 weeks. With Rodgers, it's more so a mix of, hey, getting a little bit healthier, having Romeo Doubs there. They finally got rid of Sammy Watkins. Randall Cobb was out for a bit. That's the thing we tend to forget, I think, and not give enough credit for is a lot of these offenses like Green Bay, like Chicago, like the Jets to an extent, and not the Jets, but offenses that we started off the season and we said those receivers are not good. Like it's a bottom 5 group of pass catchers in the league. Right. And then those guys get hurt. And then we're surprised that the passing game isn't putting up much production or the quarterbacks aren't really making it happen. Got to remember that sometimes. So the Packers are getting healthier at the right time. They're facing an offense in Miami that we're fully expecting to make this one to a shootout. Aaron Rodgers, I do have a few spots ahead of Minshew and company.
Yeah, I think Rodgers is a fun play this week because you could see him maybe a glory game, get into a shootout. It's some of those plays where he gets to roll out and launch a 50, 60 yarder in the air to Christian Watson at a potential back and forth game. Really fun game, especially because nothing is promised yet to Miami as far as the playoffs. They still have to bring this one home on Christmas. And another reminder, by the way, folks, I'm sure if you're listening to this show, you know that Saturday is Sunday this week in the NFL calendar, although there will be 3 games on Christmas Day. And I hope you don't have to work too much on Christmas Day. And I'm trying to make sure that my plate is clear and full of, what are we going to have here? Seafood stuffed peppers, among other things. New Orleans, baby.
Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. We covered the quarterback position. I guess I'll throw one more quarterback out there just to get your temperature on. What do we think of Geno Smith going to Kansas City? It's cold. It's going to be really, really cold, but wind doesn't look like it's going to be a problem. And Geno played in West Virginia. It gets cold in West Virginia, right? Could this one be a shootout? Is Geno Smith still a quarterback one like we've seen him all year?
Man, those Geno, Tavon Austin teams back in the day, that was a fun time indeed. I have Geno, again, kind of with Rodgers and Brady, where I've just seen enough of them this year. I'm confident enough in the environment to still give him the nod over some of these more streamer type options. So you said it is cold there, but only 10 miles per hour wind. And I'm not so sure. Again, we'll see what the precipitation looks like later in the week. But that wind, again, continues to be the most important factor. And other than in Chicago and then especially Cleveland.
weekend, right?
My goodness, I don't think the weather is that brutal. So especially, I know that we're moving past quarterbacks here a little bit. I mean, I'm sure you were getting the same thing, Sig.
Yeah.
Last Saturday, like people asking me Tyreek Hill or this, random wide receiver 3 and Jalen Waddle. I'm not saying to completely throw away any, doubt in your mind and just start your studs, but I do think that moniker, when you're not dealing with extreme weather and stuff, does tend to hold true more times than not.
Yeah, but we do have extreme weather in Chicago and in Cleveland. So let's get to this. And of course, forecasts can change. Although I'm really impressed with the weather forecasting these days, Ian.
Yeah.
It was probably 3 days out. We just had a tornado down here in New Orleans. It hit the West Bank, and Arabi got hit by a tornado like 6 months ago or so too. But they had the tornado threat on our radar, so to speak, about Sunday, and this happened on Wednesday. And even Wednesday morning, they decided to let the schools out early and cancel a bunch of events Wednesday night because of that. So all I'm trying to say is, as someone, you want to have to watch the weather closely. You live in New Orleans, you'll be watching the weather forecast very closely. And the streets flood when it rains more than like an inch here. It's there's disadvantages to having your city in a bowl on literally sinking ground underneath you. But this show is about the weather as it affects fantasy football. And so it's Tuesday, and we're talking about Saturday. But that's close enough. I've been watching the forecast. It hasn't changed. The 25 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour sustained winds. And like you said, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and of course the timing of that. And we're going to look ahead when we look at some of the games on Saturday. Nashville, Foxborough, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Now, those are games where if you look at the winds, it looks like in the afternoon, evening, they're forecasting for the winds to get a little bit lighter. So we may really have to wait until the day of. But Cleveland and Chicago, which isn't it perfect, right? Cleveland and Chicago. Deshaun Watson's played one of these games in Cleveland before. It was a 10-7 game, right?
Yep.
Mary Kay Cabot cited it as a reason that he didn't want to go to Cleveland. He didn't want to play in games like that, right? But Stephon Diggs is I think in that Tyreek Hill category where you're just going to play him, right? I mean, we're not going to get cute with Stephon Diggs this week.
No, definitely not. I do think, though, Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox, Njoku, and Olave, and these other guys, that is when things change. So I'm 100% with you on Diggs being, even if there's a freaking fire like we're starting to dude out there on the field. I will say this, Sig, what do you think about this turning into a Taysom Hill game? Because, again, that is complete madness up there in Cleveland. And Taysom, it has felt point chasey with the guy all season. He has that, 3 rushing touchdowns, and he throws a touchdown early on. We're wondering if he's going to break fantasy football. And I understand that the allure has always been Dalton getting benched and then him getting that full-time quarterback job with the tight end designation. Rich man's Jeff Driscoll, who's been in the news over the past few weeks as well. Never thought I'd be referring to Taysom Hill as a rich man's anything, but here we are in week 16. But Taysom Hill, man, again, someone that I've been hesitant to really feature and boost up those ranks, but man, like David Njoku versus Taysom Hill, I think I'm probably going with Taysom at this point. We saw him come out of the bye, really lean back into the Taysom package. You managed to go throw another touchdown, as underthrown as it was. We got Rashid Shaheen out there balling, and 7 carries from the guy. So over these past 4 weeks, 9, 6, 3, and 7 carries for Taysom Hill at a tight end position that has made us go even crazier than ever, seemingly all season long. I do wonder if Taysom Hill could be that cheat code for week 16.
I like that. I had him as a cheat code last week, and like you said, it came through because of that pass, because he always feasts on Atlanta. Atlanta was the team that made him look like a reasonable NFL quarterback last year, okay?
That's true.
And then he had an 8 long touchdown run against them in week 1. And I like where you're going with this, and maybe we can do a similar exercise with Taysom Hill that we did with Gardner Minshew. These are the fun plays, right? I'll tell you what's not going to be fun. Tackling Taysom Hill in this weather, right?
He runs so freaking hard, man.
Right?
He's annoyed us over the years because he's vulturing Kamara and, he's coming in at quarterback. He's not throwing it to the guys as well as we would like. But, I think Sean Payton, he's been going on Colin Cowherd's show throughout the year. I haven't listened to all of them, but I think it was after that blow-up game Taysom had against Seattle. And Sean Payton's point was like, oh, my goodness, John Madden would absolutely love this guy, if he was still around to be evaluating football. So that is one of the things with fantasy and mixed guys. And hey, sometimes we can benefit from, the wow factor and just the positional flexibility that is Taysom Hill. But if you just look at someone, and I understand that, jack of all trades, master of none. Maybe that's not the greatest thing to have depending on your job, but the fact Taysom Hill can do all of these things, and as Peyton was talking about, like literally running down on kickoff, making a tackle, and then, oh, hey, you can throw the ball 50 yards downfield, jam it right down your throat. I mean, some of these highlights he's had over the past 2 years are absolutely wild.
Yeah, and Cecil and I have talked about this on our show, Ian. There's got to be other Taysom Hills out there, right? Yeah. There's got to be other players because, I mean, you want to say he's a unicorn, but what's great is that he's a unicorn, and let's give our props to Sean Payton here. That he, and we made fun of him. Oh, he's just going to keep, and look at the money that Mickey Loomis is paying him and all that stuff. But the reality is you can see it when Taysom Hill is on the field, especially when he's taking the snap, it makes the defense hesitate, right? It makes them think for a second. It makes them have to change modes. And also, we got to remember very valuable preparation time when you're facing the Saints. You have to practice. Defensive football still, at its essence, is assignment football, right? And you have different assignments and a different outlook on how the play is going to unfold when Taysom Hill's out there. And there's got to be enough guys out there. There's got to be, Ian, for maybe not every single team to have a Taysom Hill, but what makes him a unicorn, like you said, is he'll cover punts as a gunner. He is a fearless, rugged, fast runner. He's rocked up. I mean, he's, as running backs go, he's a power back as far as his build and his style of running. He can also run a route and catch a pass. And because he's a quarterback, he has that quarterback understanding of offensive football. And I think every team would benefit. I was saying last year, every team should have somebody who can make defenses honor the jet sweep, right? This is why we have so many guys that are 150, 160, 170 pounds now that are hanging around the NFL. Hey, maybe Tutu Atwell eventually could make that role fantasy friendly, right? It continues to change and push, like Taysom Hill has this year, position eligibility notwithstanding, push the limits of what type of player can become fantasy relevant. I would love to see a future in the NFL where every team has an offensive mode where their Taysom Hill comes out and puts the defense in fire drill mode, and a player who plays like every play might be his last. That's what's great.
So many of these wide receivers and skill position players, they play quarterback in high school because they're by far the best player on the team, and the coach just wants them to have the ball in their hands each and every play. I mean, he's unfortunately been too banged up this year to play much, but like watch Kadarius Toney throw a football and you're going to be absolutely amazed. Cedric Wilson with the Cowboys last year is out there throwing dimes whenever
Mohamed Sanu.
Oh my goodness, the GOAT.
his passer rating is outstanding.
You know what's so funny about that, though? He's so good in Atlanta, and then all of a sudden, Russell Gage with the Falcons. I think he was PFF's highest graded quarterback last year on a whopping 3 passes. So Mohamed Sanu's a system wide receiver turned quarterback, some might say. But yeah, with Taysom especially, man, I think the one spot that he's really been so great for them is in those fantasy-friendly goal line opportunities. The field shrinking. Look at the quarterbacks they've had. Breeze, Bridgewater, and now Jamison Dalton. I mean, none of those guys are anything close to a dual threat. So bringing Taysom and forcing those defenses to respect the run in an area of the field where it's already condensed, you're just making it that much harder and actually forcing them to then play 11 on 11 football. So, hey, Taysom Hill, again, haven't gotten to my tight end ranks just yet, but I don't think top 6, even top 8 is out of the question in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, the easy exercise is who are we definitely playing over him? And that's like Kittle, Kelsey, I guess Dalton Schultz because of the matchup with Philly and Philly's outside corners.
I'd probably give Hawkinson,
right?
Goddard, probably Goddard's where it gets close. I think that's where it gets close.
Right. With hinging off of Minshew, but you're right. It does put him right around tight end 6, tight end 8, and it's ready-made conditions for him, and it could be. And if you're talking about ceiling, I mean, it could be a very high ceiling game for him, just because, again, when you simulate these kind of temperatures, Ian, I've been doing this 17 years now. I cannot remember another weather system like this coinciding with an NFL slate. And there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable players, and it's not necessarily going to matter for the passing game unless there wins, but it is going to matter for that the cumulative effect of the running game. And how teams are it's just going to suck. I mean, it's going to really suck. I mean, there are going to be some players who really thrive on it. You know what I love to look for on days like that, Ian? Are the guys who are playing in just the jersey with no undershirt or anything like that, Yeah, give it to me. So you got to love it. Pure football.
It's always the O linemen. I mean, they're the biggest badasses out there, obviously. But
Yeah.
no sleeves, no problem for those guys. I don't know how they do it. I was at a Bears tailgate this last Sunday, man, and rookie mistake, only one pair of socks. Oh, dude.
Yeah, your feet
Single
were numb.
digits. Oh, it was so bad. So bad.
That's funny. I went to Syracuse for 4 years for college, and you have to have good wool socks, good gloves, good boots, good hat, good jacket. And then you can survive. Like, that's it. You can survive, but that's all right. You'll never
Everything
forget
else,
that.
I had the gloves, man. Because I went to school in Chicago, so
Okay.
I just forgot the freaking second pair of socks. Well, I won't forget again, though, Sig. Mark my words.
But that was that's a good scene to be at. I'm really happy. I've been saying this. I just like to say it because we're keeping it positive here. I'm just so happy for Jets, Jags, Bears, Lions fans, long-suffering fans. If you're still a fan of those teams and you love your team and you have something that is a real emotional connection, that there's a lot of bright, good football on the horizon. All right, turning the page and let's take a look at running backs. And the funny thing is things have kind of sorted themselves out, Ian. I don't think that our start sit questions are going to be that interesting this week, in so much as it's pretty clear who's in and who's out. But let's take, for instance, James Conner. I know there was a question in the chat room earlier about James Conner, like sit one. And I said it was Conner because it is Tampa Bay. It is Arizona with a backup quarterback. Conner's been playing some great football. But is he the kind of guy that you break ties against this week because of the matchup and the trajectory of the team?
The usage is just so bonkers for him. He had the highest snap rate of anyone in the league last week at running back, 92%. And this has been something that we've seen Cliff really do ever since he got to Arizona, whether it's David Johnson, Kenyon Drake, Chase Edmonds, James Conner himself. I mean, like even, Benjamin for a game, like they will hand the entire backfield over to a back if they don't trust the backups. And that is currently the state of affairs. If it is confirmed, though, that we go from Colt McCoy to Trace McSorley, that's when I'll probably end up having Conner more so as an RB2, even though he has the RB1 level workload. Going from Kyler to Colt McCoy, sadly, I'm not saying real life. I fully understand we want Kyler out there, but even just the impact that we've seen over the years on rushing quarterbacks, on their team's running backs. Like there's a reason why Josh Allen is great for everyone except those running backs. Jalen Hurts. Yeah, okay, Miles Sanders has had, that nice little touchdown regression bump this year, but we see he's not getting those targets. They're scrambling instead, checking down, and they factor into that equation near the goal line. So going from Kyler to Colt McCoy, I don't know about you. I really didn't adjust my ranks all that much from skill position guys. But if we go from Colt McCoy to Trace McSorley, now we have a guy that has a little bit more of a Kyler mindset in terms of running, especially scrambling when things aren't right. And he's nowhere near either of those guys when it comes to his ability to throw the football. So we saw it last week with Carlton Davis. My goodness, what a game he played against Jamar Chase. So certainly a Tampa Bay team that's inexplicably still in first place, still playing very hard as I can at this time of the year. That would be the point for me where James Conner would no longer be a must start. But again, with that sort of true every down workhorse usage, awfully tough to keep that guy out of the starting lineup.
Yeah, glad to see him earning that contract. Cancer survivor and a fun Pittsburgh story who has had an excellent third act of his career. How much does Khalil Herbert's return take the shine off of David Montgomery coming off a 2-touchdown game?
I was talking to my guy Nathan Yonke a little about this today on the PFF Fantasy Football podcast. So you can check out our waiver show there. Solo pod tomorrow. Now gets you back with injuries on Friday. But if you actually look at what the Bears have done with Montgomery, he hasn't had that 90% plus role. They've actually used Darrington Evans, Steven Treston Ebner, a decent amount to sub him in and out of the picture. So I still think Montgomery, as he was doing with Khalil Herbert in the picture, should be getting between 15 and 20 touches in a Bears offense that has honestly been a lot better than we expected, particularly after those first 3 rough games. So Montgomery, if Herbert is back in the picture, maybe not someone that I'm going to be booming up into top 15, start him no matter what. Still, though, I don't necessarily think he's going to all of a sudden be dropping below 15 touches. Herbert, I'm definitely not trusting because who knows what kind of role he's going to have stepping into the equation. But Montgomery, someone that I think has consistently been a solid mid-tier to low-end RB2, has been producing like an RB1 more times than not over these last 4 weeks. I think he's still someone that you can relatively relatively fire up with some confidence as a top 18 guy. It is funny that Montgomery, like this is what, third or fourth year in the league. I feel like every single season he starts coming on strong, during the back half. So I know there's a lot of Khalil Herbert, stands out there. And this is to me, it's like a similar version of Dallas where I do think that Khalil Herbert is awesome. And if you do pull up a lot of numbers of him versus Montgomery, they're going to tell you that the better rusher is Herbert, just like they'll tell you that Pollard is better than Zeke. But in the year 2022, it's legal to have multiple really good running backs on the same team. I think Montgomery sometimes gets a little bit too slandered. Hey, you can hype up Khalil Herbert, you can hype up Tony Pollard without putting down the other guy,
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it might be disappointing to a lot of people in fantasy circles, dynasty fantasy football. But I think the best outcome for Dave Montgomery and the Bears is for him to come back on like a 2-year deal for $12 million or something like that, something reasonable that keeps this team together. Because you're right that after the first 3 games, this is fun. And as an aside, since you mentioned that, I just think it's something. I mean, obviously for fantasy football, the important thing is for us to remember how much things can change over the course of a season. Look at the Detroit Lions run defense, but also confidence, just how much confidence matters for players. And Justin Fields' confidence, you can see it. And with it, you can see the lack of confidence in defenses on how to defend him. Even that Eagles defense. Hey, the Eagles defense, and who did he even have to throw to last week, Ian? They're playing on their heels.
Byron Pringle was the number 1 by the end of it.
Right. The Equiminius St. Brown went out. Minius. And you could still see the Eagles, a very good defense stacked at every level, were playing on their heels. They were playing hesitant, a half beat behind, waiting to see what he was going to do because he's that kind of threat. And we knew that was in him from his time at Ohio State, but we haven't seen it since the confidence. I was facing Bill Belichick, right? Bill Belichick is like, you've passed the test, go out there and flourish. Okay.
But we saw a little bit, Sig, with like early career Josh Allen before he became the freaking world beater superstar, one of the best pure passers in the NFL. Even in 2018, 2019, just like Fields, we saw him be a really great fantasy quarterback with the willingness to run and everything. But defenses would still have problems because with that arm strength, with that scrambling ability, for better and sometimes worse, you do need to cover every square inch and account for every square inch of that football field. So, Fields, we all heard about the processing speed and stuff. He still has some room to go as a passer, but hey, I'm not saying it's being next Josh Allen, but you look at some of these quarterbacks, and when Chase Claypool was supposed to be the savior for this dude in a passing game, I mean, it's just been unfortunately a terrible start to his career in terms of the supporting cast, in terms of being able to function with the same offensive coordinator over the course of an offseason. So I'm just happy. And I know, again, going back to Chicago, like majority of my friends are Bears fans, and they're pretty pleased with this season because, of course, they didn't expect to compete. You've been seeing them lose a lot of close games that they can show they're competitive in, but they end up losing. So you're doing a good job tanking without, the players completely falling out of favor. And the big thing is, I mean, I can't imagine the Bears are going to use their top pick on a quarterback at this point. How could you move on from Justin Fields to this? So I really feel like, especially compared to last year, Chicago fans and the organization, like you got a guy you can build around, or at least for these next few years, feel confident that he's worthy of being built around. Because again, you get the new regime in there and it's like, who knows what's going on? So Fields, and honestly, Jalen Hurts and Tua as well, man. Like we can sit here now and, put the hindsight on and just say, oh yeah, we always knew these guys were going to be great, but very different conversations were being had, by people, even including myself. I didn't know if Tua was going to be able to make this big of a leap from last year to this season, but he has. And, fair play to all those guys. I think each of those organizations, obviously to different extents with Miami and Philly, and far more competitive this year than Chicago, but it feels good for these teams. I mean, look at, you list the Chicago Bears quarterbacks over the last 30, 40 years, and it's going to be a pretty bad list. So far, so good for Fields in 2022.
Yeah. And like you said, it's just excitement. I mean, you're excited as a Bears fan. You're excited now for what the future is going to bring. And you mentioned the 3 quarterbacks together, and in so much as there is justice in fantasy football, because boy, when you start paying close attention during the fantasy playoffs, it really seems senseless, right? It's really like these are going to be this is how we crown a champion, but it's not that different than the NFL in some ways because injuries deplete teams. There are bad bounces, there are missed calls and things like that. But there is justice in so much as you believed in Jalen Hurts, you've been rewarded. Scrambling for a quarterback this week, let's see, but you still were rewarded probably with a first round bye, or at the very least, you advanced to this week. If you believe believed in Tua Tagovailoa, if you believed in Tua Tagovailoa, what he could do for Tyreek Hill, what he could do for Jalen Waddle, you've been rewarded for that. Now, those guys had the fortifications built around them for success. Justin Fields was left naked out there.
I know.
And he's still doing it. And he's doing it in a way, what I love, and for fantasy, this has to perk up your ears when they mention to him, hey, about 200 yards away from the single season quarterback rushing record. He's like, oh, yeah, I'll go for it. Sure. That's what we want to hear for sure. All right, let's talk about a few momentum plays. Players, because we don't want to overthink this, right? Like the momentum play of the week last week was Jerick McKinnon. Right? If you just didn't argue with it, just like, hey, he won weeks on people's benches. Well, he can't really do that. He would have won weeks if he wasn't on the bench in week 14. So put him in week 15, even though we thought Kansas City was going to handle Houston and it was going to be more of an Isaiah Pacheco game. What about momentum for Tyler Allgeier? Not an easy matchup at Baltimore, but a game Baltimore is not running away from anybody right now. So Allgeier should get fed.
It's one of those things where, again, longtime president of the Cordero Patterson fan club here. So I would love to be pissed at Arthur Smith and why are we splitting the touch? Because since CPAC got back from injury, he is literally tied with Allgeier for carries. And I think CPAC has a couple more overall snaps out there, but I would love to be able to, I don't want to put anyone down, you know me, man, but I would love to be able to be mad about CPAT not getting the ball enough, but Tyler Allgeier's going out there and doing the damn thing. That said, I just have a tough time getting too overly excited about it. Desmond Ridder, man, just his first career start, but that was bad on the road in Baltimore against a defense that, we've seen them be had by some really good passing offenses throughout the year, but they really do seem to be a pass funnel more than anything. So Tyler Allgeier, not someone I'm going to be completely forcing into the lineup, but hey, we did lose Caleb Huntley, which hopefully gets us down to more of a 2 running back committee. That said, Avery Williams is still going to be out there for a few snaps. So it's one of those things, man, where can Tyler Allgeier make the most out of 15 carries? Yeah, I think so. Look, J.K. Dobbins just did something similar this last week. So it's possible in standard leagues. Like, I think we're probably talking about a legit low-end RB2 potentially in Tyler Allgeier. But, man, they just don't throw the ball to any of these guys, including Cordero Patterson. So with Allgeier, it has been going well. It was also going well for Zonovan Knight before last week. And then all of a sudden he runs into, as you pointed out before, a Lions run defense that has been improving an awful lot. So I just really worry about this Falcons offense in general. I think only the Saints are have a lower team implied total this week. So Tyler Allgeier is good. The Falcons run offense this year has been awesome. And that's one of the things where early on in the year, I know we were equating Arthur Smith to Byron Leftwich for them both hating fantasy football. And I didn't see that at all. Arthur Smith was in his right to actually
try to win.
And he was winning and he was putting up big points. So yeah, he doesn't want to hear about Kyle Pitts' lack of targets in post game after they just scored 30 and 1. Byron Leftwich is bringing fantasy football in this out of nowhere when his real life offense isn't capable of scoring real life points. So big distinction there. But unfortunately, nowadays the Falcons offense has gotten back down to being that bottom 10 offensive environment we kind of figured they would be throughout the year. And unfortunately, in these terrible offenses, when things are split up even 2 ways, awfully difficult to get behind it in fantasy land. So hey, we've seen in Denver, Latavius, enough
injuries. Going there. That's where I was going.
So Judy, again, we can live with guys in bad offenses when it is really concentrated around literally 1, maybe 2 guys. So I don't want to completely put it out, but if we're looking at matchup, volume, efficiency, and offensive environment, Allgeier is only really checking one of those boxes. So that's why I'm having a little bit of a hard time fully, start him no matter what.
So what about Latavius Murray? Because he's another momentum play, and you saw Denver actually even make some changes to the offense last week, right? More 2 tight end sets, more 3 tight end sets. They were running the ball a lot better. They're playing the Rams. We saw the Packers running backs account for most of their offensive production on Monday night. So is Latavius Murray, are you overthinking it if you don't play Latavius Murray this week?
Again, always depends on the roster. If you got David Connor, Kenneth Walker, and Pollard, I'm going to tell you to go ahead and sit Latavius Murray out of that group. But I think your point about this Rams defense being had, you look at it, Raiders ran for $165 against them 2 weeks before. It makes sense that you take away probably the single best player in football in Aaron Donald, and all of a sudden your defense isn't quite the juggernaut that they used to be. So Latavius Murray, man, we're looking at 20 plus touches, and the only person that I can remember actively fading with that sort of workload was Kalen Balaj back on those 2018 Dolphins teams, that were just absolutely brutal. And honestly, I was treating Latavius like that for a few weeks after Melvin Gordon got out of the picture, but they did play better last week and they have the matchup. So that's enough for me. Like, again, now we're checking maybe 2 or 3 of those boxes as opposed to someone like Allgeier where we're only able to get 1.
Yeah, I think so. I think that Denver, it's sad. It's almost like too little too late because they had a defense. They had a playoff defense this year. But the offense has been a mess. But Latavius Murray, and then I always like to pause at these moments, Ian, and remind everybody that Latavius Murray wasn't even on a roster at the beginning of the season.
I know,
right? So, but fantasy football, the war of attrition absolutely applies, and we like to say at the beginning of the season, 0 with string running backs matter when we get to the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah.
And here we are. I guess I wanted to just, we're not quite off the rails yet, but I just wanted to ask, like, what about just your personal teams, where you're at in the playoffs? I guess just as you're starting to look ahead, you're getting all your work and content together, but also we've got matchups. What's stuff on your mind or players that are your heroes? How did your week 15 matchups go? Talk about Ian Hartitz, the fantasy football player right now.
We got 14 of the 22 redraft and dynasty squads in the playoffs, so you got to be feeling good about that. I did 8 of the FFPC, main event squads with my, or not main event, the Footballguys Championship with my guy Dwayne McFarland. We got 7 of those to advance, and even won 2 of the regular season. So it's been good. We'll see exactly how things go in these final 3 weeks. To your point, some of these players popping up, it really is maddening sometimes, but it's part of the game. How the guys that get you there all of a sudden, falling off at the injury or becoming less relevant than ever as soon as you need them most. Right. But that's just the way the game goes sometimes. And best ball, it was funny. I had, I think, 8 of like 25 or so of the best ball mania squads advance. We got one still on into week 16, and it was mostly because of Russell Gage popping up out of nowhere for some team I drafted back in May when it still looked like he would be holding on. So looking at that big fat 0 for Rob Gronkowski there at tight end, but you take Evan Ingram in round 17 back then when no one's on the scent, and all of a sudden it works out. So good year. And just again, the randomness, I try to judge overall my own fantasy success just by the amount of playoff squads you have, because at that point, single elimination, it is such a random game. Oh my gosh, as the late great RIP Norm Macdonald used to say, don't bet on football, the ball isn't even round. So one of those things where certainly I don't want to completely throw away my process based on how a 1 or 2 week sample size is going, but overall feeling good, man. So it's one of those things where I know you're like me, where we're just on it every single week of the year. And sometimes you want to be able to zoom out and make sure that this process that we're focusing on is indeed correct. But I'm feeling good about it, man.
Yeah, you should. You should. Ben in the chat room saying that he watched draft streams that you did. I didn't get a chance to watch them, but Dwayne's awesome. Another very frequent visitor to the couch. How did y'all come up with a scheme or just an agreement in advance of how you're going to have like 2 chefs in the kitchen?
It's one of those things, man, where before Dwayne's not doing awesome things at MB Fantasy Life, but when he was at PFF, man, I don't know how that dude's family is still with him. The amount of podcasts I made him do with me, just talking through everything. So really, man, we ended up seeing things pretty clearly. We had some disagreements. Not, he was a little bit higher than me on Albert O, which, like, yeah, I'm not trying to completely bring up his worst take on that. But there was also other things like where I definitely wasn't considering Juju Smith-Schuster as much as I probably should have been. Neither of us were on Josh Jacobs as much as we should have been. So it's one of those things where I think when you have such a deep respect of someone else's effort and hard work and their process, which I think Dwayne and I share with each other, it's a lot easier to go through these things. So I'd generally when we would have the tiebreaker scenarios, it's like, all right, who amongst us feels most strongly about our take, and then you kind of let them do it. And again, I think it's easier to do that when you're well aware of how hard the other person's working. And honestly, I feel like just with jobs in real life, I've noticed that too, where it's so much easier to put in these big time hours and to, cancel some party because you got to work. It's so much easier to do that when you're working with people who you also know are working that hard. Things get a lot tougher when you're isolated. But yeah, man, those streams were fun. I didn't do them live because I didn't want us to like actively be getting sniped by people. people making it happen, because
right. It's still an investment. Yeah.
Because they're trying to get a few extra views in there. But no, man, like, it's drafting to me, like, is always the funnest part, most fun, whatever, most fun part of fantasy football and the experience. That's why I love best ball as well. And yeah, man, a lot of fun. Hoping to do a lot more this year.
Yeah, drafting is the best. I think that for all of us, that if it's this time of year and you still care about fantasy football, you're a degenerate like us, and it's the drafting because it's an asymmetrical, fluid puzzle, right? And so it's always stimulating, and that's the best part. Although I think that we can say now at this point, Ian, like, just put a rough percentage on this for me, because Matt Waldman's beating the drum about this forever. For success of your fantasy teams, I'm not talking about best ball. I'm talking about our classic teams where we can have waiver claims and make trades and we can set our lineups every week. What percentage of success roughly is based on how well you draft?
Ooh,
below 50%?
I think it's above 50% because
okay.
I mean, I'm sure you're in plenty of leagues. Like, some leagues will trade a lot, but hey, I said, man, I got 22 leagues. I don't really have time throughout the week when I'm trying to do because I'm always putting content first, over anything. Got to get those bills paid as much as I'd love to see some of the teams boom and take care of that themselves, obviously. But not having the time to go through every single other team in your league and this person's short on RBs, maybe I can gain that. I do think the draft ends up being roughly 60-70% of how big it is. And, a lot of it is unfortunately randomness. So one of those things where, hey, I think we see it. And it's one thing that I think some people are, not to make people feel sorry for us or anything, we are so blessed to have this job. If I'm wrong on something, call my ass out. That's all good. But like the best gamblers in the world, the professional gamblers who can just make a living on that, even them, they're only hitting, 57, 58% of their bets. So I'm not saying, predicting a fantasy football outcome is the exact same, near 50-50 occurrence as a lot of those gambling spreads can be. But it is one of those things where, if I'm going to miss a guy in week 15, I would like to think the whole process and, people believing in me or not believing me isn't fully based just on that one instance there. That said, man, if you are just continuing to miss that, and again, not taking, a bigger overall view on things, can get you in trouble.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying. I really love it. It speaks well to your golden soul, Ian, that you would start by saying, like, hey, I'm not saying feel sorry for us, because there's a lot of people. The way I like to put it, Ian, is there's a lot of people who have a much tougher bargain that they have to make with the world for the right to exist. There's a lot of topics I could go off on right here, and a lot of those people are people that help us pay the bills. Like they're so no, we're there's a lot of people that would love to do what we're doing, but the reality is, we're going to be wrong a lot more than right. But that's how you curate your audience with your humility, or if you project certainty, that's when people come out with the long knives when you're wrong, and you're going to be wrong a lot. And if you project humility and you also share the process, then you're going to draw people that have those same kind of values.
And that's kind of where it's,
Go ahead.
It's so easy these days with TikTok and tweets and these quote graphics. I mean, everyone just wants to have the one hitter quitter quote line that gets you all the attention and all that. But man, I get my best tweets, I get my best ideas, my best ramblings on podcasts from actually sitting down, writing and going through pretty much every single team and doing that hard work. So even though things like the short videos, like the, single line tweets like those in of themselves are not, but it's one of those things, man. It's like that meme where you have the iceberg, the glacier or whatever. And like you see at the top, that little thing showing that you care about is, the viral TikTok or whatever, but all that work that's underneath the surface is, I think, what helps you get to that point in the first place. So any, aspiring fantasy minds out there, just in anything you're doing, man, just realize that, again, getting that result, there's usually a big ass process you got to do to get there in the first place.
There's no overnight successes, right? There's overnight we learn about people, but often those people have been toiling away for years, decades, perfecting their process before it really goes big. You mentioned best ball really quick. For your teams that were successful at best ball this year, what do you look back on the best decisions or strategies or the things that led those teams to success?
I would say I got close to fully doing it, but not even as much as I wanted to. But the big mistake that I think in hindsight we can see is the disparity between the second and like third tier of quarterbacks. I think the guys like
Oh,
Mahomes and
oh,
Hurts and all them in the first 6 rounds, especially that like fifth, 6th round sweet spot. Yes, pound those guys. And I was able to do that a lot. And that was great. Where I think a lot of people went wrong was after them, you'd only wait another couple rounds. And then all of a sudden, guys like Cousins, like Dak, not knock off, obviously, at that point, but you'd have that safer tier, Rodgers, Brady. You'd have these guys
Wilson.
going, Russ, in like rounds 9 or 10. And the difference between those guys and the Jared Goffs, the Carson Wentz, even like Trevor Lawrence way down the road, I think waiting in that middle spot, it was basically like the QB dead zone. We always talk about
Right.
the running back dead zone. That was the QB dead zone. So avoiding that, being able to take some chances on those wide, the Garrett Wilsons, the Jahan Dotson a little bit, like getting chances on those running backs and wide receivers that were falling past that. I mean, I know they're not as valuable darts as you're going to see in the first 4 or 5 rounds, but it was just distinguishing that if you are a starting quarterback in the NFL and we can feel reasonably well about them, going throughout the year. I mean, I was able to get a lot of Carson. I know he got hurt, so it didn't quite work out, but I was getting Carson Wentz in like round 18 in a lot of those drafts. And you look at the available running backs and wide receivers in those late stages. And I just think, again, a quarterback projected to start 17 games, you can do a hell of a lot worse once you get to those final 2 or 3 rounds. So that QB dead zone, again, that had a bunch of those guys in rounds about 7 through 9, I think that was the wrong reach that a lot of people were making.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now I think you're right. There are two strategies that are viable. One is lock in points, and we're going to see how much Hurts and Allen and Mahomes move up. Fields probably will be in that group next year. If we see more third, fourth round quarterbacks in VBD terms, they should probably be second rounders or even first rounders. But then, like you said, you can also just get 3 in those, depending on roster spots. You just get 3 guys that are the starters week 1 expected to be the starters in week 18. And that will also work out. It's thinking that if I just wait a couple of rounds, because the reality is the difference in draft capital value between, say, a 5th, 6th round pick and an 8th, 9th round pick is not that much. But like you said, when you look at the drop off in production at that position, you aren't going to see a similar drop off at other positions like you saw at quarterback this year. So yeah, we can always look ahead to those things. And it's easier to reflect on the lessons learned, I think, when we're in the middle of the fog of war than when everything dies down and it's February and a lot of the detail gets lost. All right. And let's see, we've got like just in the holidays and everything. I guess I'll start right there. Ian, because it's the holidays. What do the holidays mean to you? When I say it's the holidays, what does that mean to you?
Just feel good, man. Something about it. Something that, I spend plenty of time just sitting on my mom's couch, but there's something about doing it on Christmas, doing it on Thanksgiving that you just, I don't know, you get that joy, man. And maybe that's just, been built into us over the years of being told it's a joyous occasion. You get gifts and, hey, it's a time where I think people try to be a bit less of a douchebag, and we should all be, happy that we can sit back and just enjoy the day. So, hey, as I got here, it's always a great day to be great. I think it's a little bit easier to, have that mindset on a, preconceived holiday. And hey, our holiday is probably just, something that's hyped up a little bit more by big businesses trying to get you, buy your significant others a gift every freaking month out here. Yeah, sure, we got that going on, but more than anything, man, just as I know, obviously, I'm with you where I'm clearing off my Christmas Day schedule. It's just unfortunate the way the NFL calendar fell on it this year, but it is what it is. Obviously getting to do whatever we want pretty much from March to August every year outweighs having a couple holiday mishaps during the season. But man, to me, I still give Thanksgiving the slight nod over Christmas and the power rankings because I got food, I got football, I got family, whatever order you want to put those, and you want the faith in there too, good for you and everything. Just maybe not quite as important to me as other people, but regardless, man, I just love that day from start to finish. And yeah, man, great time of the year.
Yeah, it is. What was your favorite Christmas gift as a kid?
Ooh,
we're going on the couch here. We're going deep in.
Yeah, I would say I got a pair of these green and white Nike Shox in like 5th grade. And that was the first time I really got a pair of shoes I loved. And if you look behind me, I have like,
nice.
Probably like 20, 25 pairs of J's or something else going on. So really, really do love my kicks out there. And that was, I'm not much of a fashion guy at all. I still wear plenty of clothes I had in high school and this and that. So we need to slowly but surely work on all that. But man, first pair of just shoes that I put on and I just I felt more confident. I felt
Yeah.
better about
Yeah.
myself. I knew they looked good. Those pair of Nike Shocks, man,
Yeah.
soft spot in the heart.
It's so funny. I think I've told this story before, but I grew up in the tiny town Bentleyville, Pennsylvania, and it really is sad because I can really reflect on see like the Walmartization of the United
Mm.
States and how it changed things. Because I think we moved there in like 1982, and there was a little store, a little corner store at the one stoplight in Bentleyville called Strictly Sports, and I remember getting the original Air Jordans there. The original
Ooh.
in a tiny little coal mining town, the original Air Jordans made it out there, and I can also remember that there was this guy Gus, and I think he was involved with helping like high school players, basketball players get recruited for college. He was involved somehow in the high school basketball scene, and he also was involved in sports cards. I was like a sports card maven when I was like 13, 14, 15. And then he would always get the newest shoes before, because I think he had something to do with basketball recruiting.
Uh-huh.
And I don't even remember. I'm going to show how ignorant I am, because I don't even remember the name of the very first David Robinson shoes. I don't know if those were the Air Force Ones or not. I could be. I'm sorry. I'm showing my ignorance here, because but I remember I had them. I had them before they were out on the market because of Gus. Because you would actually go to like the Gus's shoe stop was really just like his living room,
Awesome.
and he just had like the boxes piled up. And I wore those, and I think I got more attention for those than anything I've ever worn the entire rest of my life. But the other thing I want to mention is if you ever come down to New Orleans, there's a place here, Sneaker Politics, and this is actually a Sneaker Politics hat. This is from a series they did to commemorate amazing baseball moments. This one commemorates Doc Ellis's no hitter
Nice.
on LSD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fun documentary too, by the way.
Oh, it's outstanding. Doc Ellis is an outstanding sports character. And it also just shows you like the characters. I mean, sports was full of outlaws in the 70s, true outlaws. And Sneaker Politics does incredible work they collaborate with a lot of shoe companies to do one-off stuff.
Nice.
So if you ever I think there's one in Austin, there's one in Dallas, started in New Orleans. There's two places down in the quarter actually. So if you're in the quarter, look up Sneaker Politics, folks. It's awesome. Yeah. So sneakers, it's and Cecil, my co-host, has I don't even know how many pairs of Jordans he has at this point. It's ridiculous. So what's your prize pair of sneakers in your collection?
I got these LeBron South Beaches where they were like they kind of reissued them about a year or two ago. But I remember I had a buddy in high school he was one of those guys who, go stand outside the Foot Locker for a couple hours, get the shoes, and then go flip them on eBay later. And he got these LeBron South Beaches that he just said he could not part with. And he started rocking them in school, the pink laces, that Miami like Vice green color to me is just, there's something about it. I just love it. And I always told myself with those shoes, I was like, if I hit one of these GPPs, I win the lotto. If I just get that big influx of cash that we're always hoping for, I was like, I'm going to treat myself and buy these, $1,000 shoes. And I went on, I think it was goat.com, who, usually has some good deals and stuff and just a big selection. And I had seen these shoes were always like $1,100, $1,300 or whatever. Just wasn't in a position to really spend that much on a pair of kicks. But then when they actually reissued them a couple of years ago, being able to actually now afford those for like $400 or $500, absolutely loved it. So those are my top ones. Funny story though, I wasn't wearing those. I think it was just a regular pair of like white and blue, like Air Force Ones. But I went to a dinner with a couple PFF guys and Darius Butler, the former Colts safety, who now does fantastic work, all sorts of places, NFL media. I love his segments on Pat McAfee show specifically. But I looked down and I realized that him and I were rocking the same pair of shoes. So I mentioned at some point, I'm obviously pretty excited because I'm wearing the same shoes as Darius Butler. Completely different reaction from Darius Butler. He probably threw those things in the trash the next day. Like, I cannot be, rocking these with it. So that was a funny moment for me. But yeah, man.
No, that's, but I like the way that you pointed out that something you wear can just change your mindset, right? Yeah. We were talking earlier in the show about confidence for Justin Fields. And it's really cool. It's one of those things that can change your life, really. If you have something that makes you feel different as a person and bolder, like you said, fifth grade, like it's a time whenever we're all a little shaky, socially awkward. Oh my, and to have something like that to root you is really, really cool.
You can't really control what other people think. So just do, what you need to do to kind of make yourself feel good about whatever. That's actually, do you watch have you seen the White Lotus shows?
I was reading about it. I haven't watched it yet, but I was just reading. Some people have been mentioning it enough that I've looked it up and say, okay, what's this all about? Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah.
I love him, and the producer is actually Mike White, so I don't think it's the quarterback.
Oh, that's a Mike White show.
It's a Mike White
Oh,
show.
well,
Yeah,
now I
so
have to watch it.
there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did great stuff with that. And he was referencing some because every season starts off the same where they show a death and then they go, all right, 6 days backwards, and then we're going to
Right.
go through, and you know that. And he was making a joke like, man, I should have started all my shows off with a death, and then all of a
Right.
sudden people are getting more into it. But just I won't spoil anything. But a girl on the show at one point talking about got a her situation a little bit different than being a fantasy analyst, but her main point was like, you got these bad things happen to you. You're not happy with this. You're not happy with that. You got to go out and just do whatever you need to do, hopefully within the confines of the law and all that, and not being a dick to people, but do what you need to do to feel good about it. Cause otherwise what's the fucking point
Right.
of anything,
Yeah.
man? I'm not a big meditator or anything like that, but the one thing that I do think helps you kind of get back level headed and just feel better is realizing how really unimportant everything is, man. We live on a rock floating around the sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the end of the day,
Enjoy
like
it.
some at Joe1234 hates on me for my bad picks or whatever a week ago. Like, does that really matter in the grand scheme of things? No. And I'll still try to get better on those picks. Don't get me wrong. But I do think, again, zooming out and just realizing, we always say the NFL is a week-to-week league. Well, life is a day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. Just trying to take things so seriously and just try to be the best version of yourself. Why not?
Yeah. Try to enjoy it while you're here, first and foremost. That's why it's always been fun from the very first time I had you on the show, Ian. Is I know you're enjoying life. You're enjoying being Ian in this life, and that's not really the goal here. And some of the stuff you bring up just reminds me of again. I tell this periodically. I think it's time. The holiday season is another good one to bring up. Talking about films, and you mentioned Mike White, by the way. He did a show, Enlightened, I think it was called. The one
Okay.
with
I think
Laura
he might have
Dern.
actually referenced that one. He's like, I should
Yeah.
have put a murder in the beginning.
Yes, yeah, and it's 6 Feet Under. That show started out with a death every
Nice.
episode. It
Yeah.
was a good one. It was 6 Feet Under.
I've seen a few. I need to get through it all.
It's certainly a thought-provoking show that doesn't like sugarcoat anything. But absolutely, I'm always reminded of a film, Wings of Desire, Wim Wenders. I've mentioned it on the show a few times. I may have mentioned it on the show with you. I don't remember what I repeat myself a lot these days. I'm getting old. But in this film, it's a beautiful love letter to Berlin. First of all, just a gorgeous black and white shot. The city of Berlin. But they're angels, and the angels are watching the people. Basically, it seems like the angel's job is like to watch the people and catalog when they have life affirming moments, right? They meet up with each other and say, oh, today I saw an old lady who had her umbrella out when it started to rain and she closed it and got wet, let herself get soaked, things like that. They'd report to each other, here's all the things. But of course, one of the angels, because you're an angel and you're immortal and you have access to knowledge and everything like that, he sees the human beings and enjoying the sensations of life.
Yeah.
And he wants to be a human, right? He just wants to feel the sun on his face, right? Take a bite out of a hot dog, whatever, and experience it. Because what we don't realize is that we already have the greatest gift. We already have it. And there's so many things shouting at you, telling you what to do with it. But like you said, just be yourself. My mom taught me that people can see who you really are. So don't bother wasting any energy trying to make them think things about you.
Yeah.
Just be you. And hopefully, and you let that light come to the surface, and it'll be attractive. You mentioned Norm Macdonald. It reminds me of the Norm Macdonald moth joke on Conan O'Brien. One of the best things ever. Norm was awesome.
4 minutes up to that punchline.
Yeah, I love it. It's a real meta joke there, but I'm kind of giving away the punchline of the joke when I say it's the light. It's the light that we're drawn to, and we all have that light inside of us. And it's really a beautiful thing that in our fantasy football world, you mentioned Dwayne, all the people, like they bring your light out when you interact with them. And that's in a lot of ways what I've tried to do with this show. It's just bring together the people in the fantasy football world that make me happy to be alive and happy to get to do what I do, because I get to hang out with great people like Ian and all of you all in the chat room, everybody listening, everybody who's part of our tremendous community in fantasy football. And more, I mentioned this again and again, the numbers used to fall off as we get this point of the season, but they're not falling off nearly the way they did. I think this is also just about we're hanging out, we're keeping each other company, we're helping each other enjoy being alive. And you all help me all the time with that because you're so classy.